The results are in. In the first match, Lincoln's Inn Team 3 versus Lincoln's Inn Team 6. Lincoln's Inn Team 3 scored 83 points, and Lincoln's Inn Team 6 scored 103 points. In round 2, the second match, Kingston scored 78 points, and City scored 104 points. Therefore, the two teams going forward will be Lincoln's Inn Team 6 and City. The motion for round 3 will be: this House believes that the UK should leave the EU. Arguing for the motion that the UK should leave the EU will be Lincoln's Inn Team 6. And arguing against will be City. You will now have 30 minutes to prepare your arguments. Meanwhile, we'll have another recess and the judges can have a bit of a break. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. Right, so we've come to the moment of truth, the final round. The two teams that will be competing in this round are Lincoln's Inn, Team 6, and City. So if you'd like to take your places, please. Lincoln's Inn arguing for the motion on my right, and City arguing against the motion on my left. So the format for this round is the same as round 2. It will be 2 minutes speaking per individual and then a 1 minute period per team to rebut the other team. So starting arguing for the motion that the UK should leave the EU is Lincoln's Inn.
The proposition is this House believes that the UK should leave the European Union. We will both be arguing in favour of that proposition. Our main argument is that Britain no longer needs to be part of the EU, and this is for two main reasons. The first being financial, the second being because it's powerful enough in its own right to make membership no longer a mandatory requirement. As to the first, it can be stated that Britain could have all the benefits of being part of the European Union without actually being part of it. And this is certainly true in the case of a country like Norway, where it has been able to form agreements with countries within the European Union without being bound by its policies and required to give effect to its directives. Following on from this is the point that there is nothing to indicate that the same would not be true in the case of Britain. It's perfectly conceivable, and indeed policy seems to suggest that it would be the case that Britain would still be able to have travel within the European Union without visas if it were to leave the European Union. So what we really say is, why pay for what you can get for free? As to the second point, it has been said that Britain derives a certain power from its membership to the European Union, and that a country like the US, and in particular its President Barack Obama, has recently spoken out that he endorses England's membership to the European Union. But what we have seen tonight in the second debate is that Britain forges links with other countries outside of the European Union, in particular in its membership to the United Nations. It no longer is the case that its power, its status in the world, depends upon its membership to the European Union. And we say that this is right, the time has come, Britain should leave the European Union.
Thank you. I will proceed to rebut a few of my colleagues' points during the course of my argument. I believe that the UK should not leave the EU. Not only does continuing membership of the EU confer economic and global diplomatic benefit, but also it does not restrict the UK's discretion as to action to the extent suggested by the other side. The economic benefit is significant. The EU is the largest trading bloc in the world, and the free movement of workers allows the UK to attract skilled individuals. Furthermore, immigration has helped the UK to fill valuable service sector roles to keep the economy growing. The increase in global diplomatic power is also an extremely significant benefit. The UK has far more weight on the international stage. And the suggestion that Obama's comment is somehow not in support of our motion is confusing, as surely the fact that the USA, one of the UK's key allies, affirms the benefits of its continued membership of the EU is an excellent reason to remain a member. The mention that the UK has bridges with other countries apart from the USA is also an important point, because it is precisely as a bridge between Europe and the rest of the world that the UK is seen as a valuable diplomatic ally. Furthermore, since Maastricht, there has been a development of a multi-speed Europe, with countries being able to integrate and adhere to European policies to the extent that they feel able and would prefer to. Therefore, the EU membership is not as restrictive as suggested. For example, the UK can choose to opt out of fiscal integration and has indeed opted out of the European Monetary Union. Therefore, the membership of the EU not only confers significant economic and global diplomatic benefit, but is in fact not restrictive on the UK's discretion as to action. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the second speaker, and I act for the proposition that the UK should leave the UK. May I deal by way of rebuttals, first of all? My friend here said that economically it is not beneficial if we were to leave the EU. I say quite the contrary. We already have established links, trade links in particular, with other European countries. If we were to leave the EU, these would not simply be diminished, because it would be economically not beneficial for both parties. They would not jeopardise their economic well-being to spite us. Moreover, I think the fact that we have such good relations with other countries, so many other products come from countries, especially China. I think if we were to leave the EU, we could broaden the relationship further, I think perhaps, and develop something that would benefit us even further. I'd like to move on to my second point, and I think this is the strongest point in this situation, that the EU is simply not democratic and not accountable. The members are not elected, as we would say in our democratic sense, nationally. They are able to, citizens do not get a vote on the legislation that passes. Legislation is passed either by consensus or by majority vote. I think the recent example of bailing out Greece is a prime example. Surveys show that most people in the UK do not think we should have bailed them out, and yet we were forced to. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that gives a clear example why the UK should leave the EU. Thank you.
We're going to leave further rebuttals until the final minute. I want to talk about three broad ideological or philosophical reasons why the UK should remain in the EU. The first reason relates to the underlying ideal of European integration. This is an ideal which we contend the UK ought to subscribe to. The project of European integration arose after a period where nation-states were seen as aggressive, oppositional forces. This led to 2 world wars, and out of the ruins of the Second World War, the EU was forged. It seems to me that to suggest we should leave this project of national integration and cooperation would be to return to a period in which the nation-state was fundamentally an agent for confrontation and aggression. The second reason, and it's related, that I want to advert to, is that, in fact, and this actually goes to a point that my colleague made about democracy, in fact, the EU has conferred a far greater range of rights on the individual than that which existed before the UK's membership of the EU. EU law confers directly effective rights on the individual which they can bring before national courts. In fact, therefore, the EU is a force for liberalism and for individual rights, and the UK ought to espouse that. My final point simply refers to social justice. The UK has a duty in terms of social justice to remain in the EU. One of the fundamental aims of the EU is to even out inequalities in development, economic development between different regions. Outlying and post-industrial regions, through the structure of the European Regional Development Fund, are supported through the EU, and the UK ought to support that action. Thank you.
Two rebuttals, firstly. First, it was said by the Right Honourable Lady for the opposition that I'd overlooked the point and perhaps not looked at the fact that economic benefit is derived from membership to the European Union. What I meant to say was that it is beneficial to England to deal with countries within the European Union, but that it can do so, it can play the game without being bound by its rules. Second, the Right Honourable Gentleman made the point that social justice requires continued membership of the European Union. We say that it's in Britain's interests that to make affairs at home its priority rather than to seek a general global justice within the European Union. To summarise the case for this House in closing, we would advocate leaving the European Union for four main reasons. First, because economic benefit can be derived elsewhere. Second, because it's unaccountable. Its members can go to Europe, go to Brussels and make legislation which has not been endorsed within the national court. Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard that there is tangible economic benefit to the membership of the EU. It makes the UK a negotiator on the world stage, but furthermore there are ideological benefits to its membership. I'd like to come to a key point of rebuttal, that the UK can trade with other countries that are not EU member states. And I'd like to point out that the Confederation of British Industry, the voice of industry itself, has seen value in the EU and has rejected the idea of the UK leaving it. Furthermore, the ideological reasons are incredibly important, particularly in the context of the UK, with its absence of a written constitution. The enshrinement of liberal values in a supreme body of the European Union is all the more important. Therefore, I think a combination of the tangible benefits and the more philosophical, intangible ones lead us to the conclusion that continuing membership of the European Union is beneficial to the UK and the European Union itself. Thank you.
Thank you to both teams. Some really outstanding arguments there, given the circumstances under which they've had to prepare, and only having 30 minutes to collate their arguments for this final round. The judges are now going to confer and come up with their final scores, and then we will announce the winner of this year's national debating competition. Thank you.